This is episode 49, WorldWise Tutoring with Lindsey Wander.
Can you remember a time you failed? A time you were so close to your goal but it all came crashing down? We've all been there. But why does this happen? Why do we sometimes fail when we attempt to scale? Here's the secret. In order to grow your business and expand your mind, you need a controlled environment, like a plant growing in a greenhouse. It's my mission to help experts and entrepreneurs grow rapidly by leveraging outside resources and unlocking universal wisdom. But the question is, how will they do it? Join me on this epic journey as we monetize our passions, scale our businesses, and master eternal abundance. My name is Aaron Civitarese, and this is the Growth Podcast.
All right, this is the Growth Podcast. My name is Aaron Civitarese, and I'm here today with Lindsey Wander, CEO and founder of WorldWise Tutoring, all the way over in the States. Lindsey, welcome to the Growth Podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. My pleasure. So we were getting to know each other, a little bit before hopping on here. I'm excited to chat with you. The education industry is something that needs to be discussed openly, frankly, and I'm excited to have this conversation with you. Before we get too deep into all of that, tell us a little bit about you, a little bit of background. I'm curious. Who's Lindsey?
Oh, wow. Okay, so what are we going to talk about? So I'm originally from California, Southern California, and when I graduated with my degrees, which are very high in math and science basis, I decided I wanted to explore different career options before jumping into it. And I wanted to travel the world. So I took a bunch of internships nationally and internationally, exploring different ways that I could use because I had degrees in biology, chemistry, and math, and kind of figuring out how could I use these degrees before I just jumped right into a career for the rest of my life. And one of the internships I had was an environmental education position. And I just fell in love with teaching and ended up scratching those degrees, going back and getting a teaching credential. And I was a classroom teacher for several years in South Central California, actually. So I was in low-income neighborhoods teaching STEM to middle school students. And I loved it. I loved it. It was probably one of the best jobs I've had. But I didn't really like California. And so I wanted to move to Chicago. And when I came to Chicago, I tried to find a school that allowed me to have the same student-centered approach and the same freedom to teach, and didn't really find it. I found that a lot of the schools that I was applying to were very test focused and really focused in on those scores. And I decided at that point, I'd been tutoring for many years. Why don't I just start tutoring full time? I didn't go into it planning to have a business, but within a couple years, I had outgrown myself and had to start hiring people and forming a business. And here I am now, 9 years later, and helping students not just in Chicago. I've expanded throughout Illinois. I've also expanded a few years ago to Texas. And then obviously with recent events, we've really blown up online. We've always offered online, but it's really blown up online to where we've been able to help students all over the world. So it's been a wild ride, but it's led me right where I need to be.
Yeah, as it usually does.
Yeah.
You can look back and connect the dots every time, right?
Every time, and think I was just where I needed to be every single moment. And when you just kind of follow that gut feeling, it never really leads you the wrong way.
True. Intuition's strong if you're listening.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. You mentioned before you started your career and began your journey in the working world, right? You wanted to travel, right? Now, a lot of people take, gap years after high school, before college. A lot of other people after college travel right away because they know once they get into that corporate structure or whatever, they're kind of screwed forever, right? Let's be honest. If that's the route you're going. Now, is that what you did? Was it like, I need to take a quick break before I move on? Is that sort of where your mindset was?
Yes and no. I think I got bit by the travel bug pretty early in my life, courtesy of my best friend and her family who took me out traveling everywhere. If you ask my mom, she blames my last name, Wander, for my love for travel. But, I got a scholarship for college. And it was just kind of told to me, that's the route you go. You just go high school to college. And so I just went that direction. But once I had the degrees, really my initial driving force was I wanted to explore careers. I didn't want to just jump right into something and end up hating it, you know, because what had happened is when I started school, I originally went to school for biomedical engineering. And once I was in it for a year, I was like, I don't like this lab work, you know, and I ended up switching my major to more of an ecology emphasis. But I was worried about that happening in a career as well, that I would be into it, you know, a year or so down the line and be like, I don't like this. And even though, you know, it was told to me from a young age, you just choose a career that makes you money because you're going to hate your job anyway. I knew there was something wrong about that, you know, and once I had these degrees, I was like, you know what, I want to find something, you know, you obviously want to make a living, but I want to find something I enjoy. The perk of that is that I got to travel. So I got to, you know, I lived in the rainforest of the United States. I was up in the mountains in Pennsylvania. I was able to go to Ireland, into Asia. So there's a lot of places that I got to see where they provided me housing. And then I was able to get the experience in the job field, but then see the world around that region as well. So it really was a win-win-win all the way around. And, you know, obviously the travel bug hasn't left me. I still find ways to incorporate travel now, which is a little easier when you own your own business, and especially when a lot can be done online. But I think, you know, maybe that was a subconscious part of that decision. I think I center a lot of things I do around wanting to travel, but the main purpose at the time was to really explore career options.
Interesting. Yeah, I think exploring career options is something that everybody should really take a close look at, because the reality is if you're in something that you don't enjoy and you have to do it your whole life, like, why would you do that? You only get one swing at bat with this life as far as we know, right? So it's insane. Like I also went through I went through, you know, banking. I went into an insurance. And then I went back to school to get a master's because I was like, well, those were both terrible. They were soul sucking and I hated them. The money was good, of course, and it could have been a lot better over time, but that wasn't the point. Even when I was young, I thought that way. And when I went back and got a master's, speaking of school, right, I went through that, and that brought me into my corporate hotel world, is where I stayed for about a decade. And, you know, I enjoyed that because I had the travel bug too. I thought to myself, like, oh, I love hotels, right? I love traveling. Like, why not just be the manager of that hotel? Like, that was my thought process. And I just went for it. I just did it, right?
Yeah.
And I'm super grateful I did, because it gave me a ton of experiences. I met a ton of cool people. And it also connected the dots to get me where I am today. And it's actually where I met my wife as well, at grad school. So that's worth it right there, you know? So
and it's true. I mean, there is a lot of, you know, knowledge and experience I gained from those internships that I still use today. And maybe even on the forefront of that is just the skills you gain from traveling in general, from picking up and moving somewhere, you know, where nobody knows you and you have to make do, especially if there's maybe a different language being spoken or just a totally different culture. That in itself you learn so many valuable skills from that. And I think one of the major things that has made me successful in my business is my ability to read and relate to people, which I strongly attribute to traveling and to being to so many different cultures. And so, you know, at the time, a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Go, you know, you should be going right into your career and you're just tutting along. But it was intentional what I was doing. I was having fun and enjoying it, but I knew that I was going to be getting some really valuable experiences and knowledge that I was going to be able to apply later in life. And I did.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, the thing that I've learned a lot from traveling is, first of all, connectivity, that we're all actually the same. Where you're from, what you look like we're actually the same. We all want the same things. We have the same similar values, right? We want health, love, relationships, you know, just a generally happy life. And we're generally loving humans for the most part, right? That's important, because when you start realizing that, you understand that, you know, we are all one, and all these like quote unquote cheesy songs you've always heard and things, they're real. Like, you know, we are one, like we are. And you see that when you're out in the world. And then the other thing is nonverbal communication, right? Eye contact, using your body. You can go as deep as NLP, right? Someone who doesn't even speak your language, but you can have a connection with eyes, And then you can have an unspoken sort of nod, like, hey, you're having a good day. Yeah, you're having a good day too. And like pass them a piece of fruit or whatever. And like you didn't even communicate verbally, but you had a moment together. I've had hundreds of those, and I'm sure you have as well. It's powerful, right?
Yeah. And also that gut feeling of knowing someone is a good person. So that intuition, I think I really developed my intuition through traveling, knowing this is a good situation and this is not a good situation. You know, this is somebody I really want to trust. This is someone I'm going to kind of keep my distance from. And I think that that's another thing that's really played into my success and being able to get me where I am today is that development of that intuition that is nonverbal, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. It's so true. You have to be on your toes out there traveling. You really do. There's loving people, but there's also a piece of just looking for an opportunity to take advantage of you, right? Yeah, absolutely. Very aware. It's an awareness that you attain from travel. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about education, right? Education. Now, we were chatting earlier before we hopped on about education, and I would love to, have a discussion around the current state of education and how you believe it's going and how it's gone before.
I'll give you my perspective because I was a classroom teacher. So I've been in that position where you do have state mandates and you do have a room of 45 kids for 50 minutes that you have to hit these state requirements. And I get it. And then, now I'm a tutor where I get to have the time one-on-one with the students and see the curriculum and the lessons that are being taught across the world and have like really, and deep involvement with it. What I think is happening is our school system has gotten too large to be managed well. And we try to create these quick fixes. And a lot of that entails just taking maybe good ideas and almost diluting them down and trying to distribute them to so many kids in the same way. And it's just not effective because kids are different and treating them all with the same material isn't really working. Plus, a lot of teaching is classroom management, just getting the kids to sit down and be quiet. And it doesn't allow for a lot of opportunity for creativity or personal expression. And those are really the skills that people need to branch off and be successful, to be the innovative thinkers and to create new solutions to problems. And we really tend to suppress that in our children just to get them to be quiet and get a pencil out. We don't really give them an opportunity to explore. So I'm a huge proponent of student-centered learning where the students are really the ones who are in control and directing their learning with structure that is provided with the teacher, but they're still able to, again, explore their own personal interests and let their mind carry them where they need to go while you're still hitting the required content and still completing, certain tasks that they need to know, like they need to know how to write, they need to know how to speak, those kind of things. The problem is it is a lot of work. It's a lot of work for teachers to set up student-centered learning. It's difficult. Sometimes it's just easier to say, here's a worksheet and do the work, and I get that. And you have to be really dedicated to it to really implement it completely. But what's happening is we have a lot of amazing students who are titled as problem children or ADHD or whatever it might be, who are being put into a box and not allowed to express who they truly are or explore their personal interests. And it's suffocating them. And I've seen it. And it's sad because if we let those kids go and be their authentic selves, it's incredible the things that these kids come up with. So the tutoring company was originally designed just to really help those kids that traditional school system was not serving them, to give them a place to be themselves and to really explore who they are and to really foster in them that individuality, the entrepreneurial mindset. I also tell them thinking like a scientist. So there's lots of different skills we work on with them that just you don't have time for in the school system.
Absolutely. So true.
It's a lot.
It's a lot, but it's bang on. Absolutely. I feel like school school back in the day was to prepare people to get a job, right? Baby boomers, even older than that, or grandparents, right? To go get a job, industrial age, all these things, get a job, stay there 40 years, get a gold watch. And that was the norm, and that was built for that. Now, I personally feel that the school system now is grossly outdated. I feel like people get more value, myself included, from masterminds, mentors, coaching programs, real life experience. I feel like education is actually, instead of being jammed down your throat and regurgitated on a test, which, by the way, I have a funny story about that. I'll tell you in just a second. Instead of regurgitating information on a test, it should be through like personal experience and your own observation of releasing ignorance from the experience. What do you think?
So I agree. But, you know, when we have a system that's so large, that's being handled, I mean, we're talking like Chicago's public school system is massive. LA Unified is massive. And when you're having a system that large, it's really difficult to provide those individual opportunities to students. So I think one of the things that has to happen is they got to get restructured into smaller units. Because, I mean, it's just like any organization. When the person managing it at the top is so far removed from the people that they're serving, you lose touch with what's going on. And what you try to do is these mandated, you know, take the ACT, and the math section will tell us, you know, your problem solving skills. The grammar section will tell us your ability to write and articulate yourself. And so they're trying to still find ways to assess those skills, but in a mass way. And it's just not as effective as if we treated the students like the individuals that they are. And it's a flawed system for sure.
Mm. Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's so large, and it's like, it's this massive thing that it's like, how do you even start chiseling that thing away to change it, right? Mm-hmm. So enter someone like you, right? You're an independent business owner. And tell us actually, in your own words, like, what was the light bulb moment that you had when you were, can you remember, like, when you were like, oh, you know, XYZ is this, and I'm going to do this because of this. You know what I mean? Can you recall that? Can you put that into words?
I don't know if it was an exact moment, but I think it's similar to some of the things you were saying. I've always believed that you should question the answers, and that you should express yourself if you had a different viewpoint. And it, you know, I found myself being suppressed when I tried to do that. And I was like, what, you know, get me out of here. This is not the right way to do it. This is not the best way to do it. There's a better way to do this. And why are you not giving me the chance to share that with you? So as a teacher, you know, once I did start teaching, I encourage dissenting viewpoints, as long as you're respectful about it. You know, I encourage you to think beyond what is happening in your homework or that you're getting taught in the classroom. If you have a better way of doing something than the way that I'm showing you, tell me, you know, like these are the skills. And so I think after seeing students really blossom with that kind of environment, I just developed it more and more. What else can I do to get them to innovate and to be creative problem solvers and to advocate and to be leaders, you know, to be active in their own lives and the lives around them? What else can I do? What else can I do? And, you know, it's been 15 years now that I've been in this industry with, you know, tutoring, and I've seen these kids go through school, go through college, go through their career, and I see what kind of people they've grown to become. And they come back to me and tell me, you know, these are the skills that really helped me, and I know it works. So I've really, you know, tailored in on that it's not just like you were saying, memorizing all the rivers in South America. Like, if you can, I tell my kids, if you can Google it, I'm not gonna have you memorize it. Like, that's ridiculous.
Yes.
Instead, yeah, right. And
Exactly.
Instead it's like, what can we do with information to think beyond what's being told to us? You know, question what you're being told and think further. And that's a little bit where the think like a scientist comes in. You're constantly looking at the world around you. What are the problems? How can I solve them? And coming up with solutions. And then, the entrepreneurial mindset is a lot of, being able to actually implement those solutions that you came up with. And that includes the planning, prioritizing, task initiation, all of these things that no one's really ever taught. They're just kind of expected to figure it out. By given so many different tasks, they're expected, they'll figure out how to manage all that, but no one's ever really taught that. And we have to keep in mind like how children's brains develop, and the part of their brain that really handles decision making, which has a lot to do with this, is the prefrontal cortex, which is the last part of their brain to develop. And so it's hard for these kids to handle these things because simply they just aren't equipped to do it. And so having someone to actually train their brain in how to do these things gives them that extra step ahead, because they already have the IQs, they already have the imagination, they already have the passion and the heart to help. I mean, the kids that I'm working with, the generation that we're working with, they're incredible. The things that they come up with, but they need the skills to implement and to make things happen. And as a former classroom teacher, I can say sometimes you just don't have the time to teach them all these things, even though they're extremely valuable.
Yeah, totally. If you can Google it, I'm not teaching it. Thank you. Oh my God.
There's no point in memorizing it if you can Google it,
Exactly. That's exactly what I've been saying to basically myself and my wife.
Yeah.
I don't go around talking education very much. Maybe I should, but this is one thing that I really talk about a lot. I say it all the time. Why do they tell you to memorize the presidents or something like this? They should be teaching you like how to, build your credit so you can get a business loan. Like this is something you need to learn. You can't Google. I mean, you could Google that, but you know what I mean? Memorizing things, it takes up space in your brain and you only got so much space in there, right? We can go into the whole structure of the mind and stuff. There's no need to take up space doing that. I said I had a funny story about memorizing, regurgitating, right? So real quick, I was in Finland going to school. I did a study abroad in college and I went over there and I studied economics. So I was studying the EU economic system in Finland, which is interesting. And, it was a memorizing like machine. There was no critical thinking. It was like, you need to remember this stuff and you need to write it on a test. So I did. I wrote it on the test and I failed the test. I wasn't the best student. I didn't like memorizing things. I just didn't. And I didn't put a lot of time into it. So I did not pass the test. So literally the next day, I went and rewrote the test. Okay, so that's weird, but that's how the structure was there. I rewrote the test the next day, and except in this test, I brought my phone with me, and I had one of my friends texting pretty much openly in front of people. I had my phone just here, and I was just texting, what's the such and such, and he would text me back the answer, and I would write it on the test. I'm not proud of it, but I kind of am, because I don't need to memorize these things, and I needed to pass my test so I could go on to my next semester back in the States where I was going to school. And I found that just mind blowing that that was the standard at which the student was held. If you failed yesterday, you can take it again tomorrow. And if you take it again tomorrow and you're struggling, go ahead and text someone. We're not really going to check that so much, I was like, wow. And then I went back to the States where I was in college, and I also had a scholarship there, right? Similar to you. I just went because I had a full ride, and I was like, I'll go to that. Right. And I was not engaged in school. I didn't go to a lot of classes and I was also doing the same thing there, just regurgitating just enough to get by. But I was way more interested in hustling a little side income entrepreneurial thing, in the parking lot. You know what I mean? I was way more into that. And I remember there was one teacher, he taught entrepreneurship. There was one class of entrepreneurship. I have to give him credit on that. And he had a t-shirt business, and I loved that class. I went to every class. Maybe I skipped one or two, but I was at most classes, and I was always attentive, and I was actually interested. I was like, oh, cool. So what do you mean? You're selling t-shirts, and how much do you pay to get them made? And how much do you sell them for? And how do you market that thing? And that's cool. How much did you make last week? I was so engaged. And I just thought to myself, man, I wish every class I went to was about building businesses and stuff, because that would be cool. And then I graduated and I went and worked at Wells Fargo Bank. And I almost it was I got to get out of here ASAP.
Yeah.
So I hear you. I do. I really do hear you. What do you think?
That's really the root of a lot of it. When a lot of parents come to me and say, my kid is not motivated, I'm like, it's usually one of several things. One, they're not interested. You know, they're not interested in the content and the curriculum. Two, they're bored. Like I got a lot of kids whose IQs are off the charts, but they're failing every class. And I was one of those. You know, I was a problem because I was bored and I wasn't being challenged and I wasn't given the opportunity to have my voice. And so I acted out. And then three, it could just be simply that, you know, they're not feeling what is the point of all this. You know, they're not seeing the connection between what they're doing and how it's actually going to help them in life. And so they just are like, this is a waste of my time. So, I mean, it has nothing, in all of those cases, the blame is the content and the schooling, not the student, you know?
Yeah, interesting. So what is a person to do, in your opinion? Like, you know, for example, someone listening to this right now, let's say they're 18, 19 years old and they're considering going to college. What's your opinion on gap years, traveling and seeing the world? Maybe you're familiar with Gary Vee. He has a famous sort of talk. I think it was, I don't know where he was, but he basically was saying you shouldn't be allowed to go to college until you have like a gap year or 3 and literally go out to the world and see what you're passionate about, see where your interests lie, see what's going on, and then sort of make an educated decision on maybe what you kind of want to do, instead of just being pushed directly into it from high school. Because let's be honest, when you leave high school, you have no worldly experience whatsoever for the most part, most people, and you just go into something because it makes the most money, or it's, you know, I'm a doctor or a lawyer and that's the best thing because that's what you heard growing up.
Or you've been classified as that type of student. You know, I have a lot of students who've been classified as math students, and so they just automatically go into math. And then I'm like, you're really into art, you know, like.
That's interesting.
So my perspective of gap year, it really hit me when I was traveling the world at 22 alongside these 17 and 8-year-olds who had been to way more countries than I had, who speak way more languages than I do, who are way more world savvy than I was, and attributed that to their gap year. And most places outside of the United States, that's very common to take a gap year. I think, you know, there's a lot of things with the United States. We're kind of in our own little bubble, and I don't know if people really recognize the value in spending time outside of their country. And it's not just so much about, we already talked about, you know, the value in understanding other cultures and other people, but you understand yourself a lot more and your own upbringing and your own country and your own culture by exploring others. And, you know, I think maybe there's a fear of, you know, people becoming unpatriotic, or I don't know what it is, but you actually sometimes are more proud of where you come from by being at other places, if that makes any sense. And I know it does to you, but you start to become proud of who you are and your upbringing because you see how it is in other places, and you're more able to identify and distinguish yourself and figure out who you are as a person. I definitely have suggested gap years to a lot of people, especially for students who are 18 and have no idea what they want to do. And I think most 18-year-olds don't, but there is, you know, a lot of, you know, teenagers at least have like a subject that they know they're interested in. You know, they're like, I like doing entrepreneurship stuff. Like at least they have an idea. I've had some kids that have no idea. They're completely uncertain. And I'm like, you need a gap year. You need to go explore, because what ends up happening is these kids go into college, parents are forking out, I don't even want to tell you how much money for them to get these degrees that they don't even end up using. And I see it happen over and over again. For these prestigious universities to get a bachelor's degree, which as much as I can say it till I'm blue in the face, it does not matter. It's a bachelor's degree. Just go somewhere and get your bachelor's if you're going to get it. It's the master's and the PhD that really the name is maybe a little more important. But I do think, you know, traveling's not for everyone, personality-wise and also financially, although, you know, I traveled the world for free, you know, through internships. There are ways around it. But there, you know, for the ones who it makes sense because they're a little lost, I think that that's a perfect solution for them. And I've seen it work.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. Yeah. Internships. That's funny. You mentioned that. My wife, she's had pretty amazing internship locations. She worked in the Maldives, we were in Singapore working, we were in the Philippines, all through hotels, right? Which, by the way, if you're listening to this now and you're wondering like what a good industry is for internships, education is one. Absolutely. I have lots of teacher friends, right? That they teach English or languages in places. And equally as openly opportunistic is hotels, because that's where I came from. And I see so many people just literally bouncing country to country, working and living for free, getting paid to travel, essentially.
Yeah, and you won't get rich. You're not going to be rich, but you're not going to go broke, and you're seeing the world, So they give you enough money to survive. They give you housing, they give you food or whatever it might be. But yeah, I mean, I had enough to stay in one place, but still travel kind of around. And I was able to do it all debt free.
Yeah, absolutely. Exactly. Yeah, us too. Same. Interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And you're getting experiences. You're experience rich, which at the end of the day, it can be argued that's more valuable than money.
Oh, heck yeah. And not only that, I've gotten job interviews. I went to kind of a no-name college, and I've got job interviews where they were just like, your experience is interesting. I just wanted to talk to you. It had nothing to do with my degree or degrees, and my honors and all these things. They were just like, it was kind of cool all the places you've been and all the, jobs that you've done. So, and again, now as a person who interviews, I do, look at their degrees just to kind of see what they are, but I want to hear about their experiences. I want to talk to their references, I want to talk to them as people. That's much more valuable than some bachelor's degree.
Yeah, super valuable. So true. So talk to us a little bit about WorldWise Tutoring. Okay, so you build this amazing company. So, literally, technically, what is it you actually do, fundamentally?
So people really reach out to us for the basics. They're like, oh, my kid is failing math class, or they're prepping for the ACT. And I'm like, all right, great. We're going to get them a good grade, a good score. All right. But here's what we're really doing. The point of my company is to get them to not need a tutor. We really try to get them to be confident and independent lifelong learners. So that entails a lot of very deliberate lessons that we interweave into our instruction to help them with as much, I try to break it into categories to really explain it. So we really try to help them with metacognition, which is thinking about how you think. So giving them the opportunity to understand that they think about things differently, to describe that and comprehend that, and then apply that to future learning experiences. There's also executive functions, which are what we were talking about earlier, the planning, prioritizing, time management, task initiation. And it also has an emotional self-regulation component, because as entrepreneurs, we know there's a lot of ups and downs. And when you hit a down, you have to be emotionally strong and resilient to get out of that low and to rebound, knowing what got you to that point and to come out of it better than you went in. And so we really work with kids on that resiliency as well, very deliberately. And then, beyond that, once you have the knowledge and the skills, what are you going to do with that? You have to interact in the world. So we also work on, social, emotional, or interpersonal skills. So getting them to have empathy, to have leadership skills, to be advocates for their own lives and for the lives of others. So there's a lot of other, active listening, kind of, what we were talking about before with the nonverbal cues, making sure that they're giving good nonverbal cues, which also helps them to listen better and have good communication, conflict resolution. So there's a lot of things, again, kind of the entrepreneurial mindset that, you hit along the way in the world of having to interact with other people that we want to really teach them in our lessons. So yes, they're going to get a good grade in math. And yes, they're going to be able to successfully do this on their own and wean off of us within a few months. But what the real big picture is, they're going to be successful in their other classes. They're going to be successful, if they do decide to go to college and whatever career they go into, in their relationships, all of these things, they can apply these skills, because having the knowledge is only part of it. You have to have the right mindset as well. So my final line to it is we're really trying to get them to be competent and conscious leaders, not just have the knowledge and the skills, but also have the right mindset to do something wonderful with that knowledge and with those skills that really impacts the world in a positive way.
Oh, that's awesome. I love it. That's awesome. That's so good. I got goosebumps. So cool. It's true. That's awesome. Yeah. It's so
And
much.
that's what education should be about.
Yeah,
It shouldn't be about the memorizing. I mean, we're shaping these young minds who are our future and who are going to really determine the route that our society takes. And I know a lot of us right now are sitting here wishing we had some competent, conscious leaders, above us now, or we wouldn't be in some of the positions we're in currently.
yeah,
So the great thing about this next generation of kids is they have the heart. I mean, they're so empathic and they're so understanding and open-minded. And that stuff is the hardest stuff to teach. Now we just got to give them the skills. What do you do with that rather than bottling it in? What do you do with those feelings you have to go out and be an agent of change in the world?
totally. That's an interesting point you make there. You know, I think with social media and people being out there more, being, visible, right? People can stream themselves live at any moment, any day for free to as many people as they want, right? There's a level of vulnerability that comes with that, especially if you're being authentic, if you're being your true self, which is something that you're always teaching people if they're like doing public speaking or they're going on stage. You're always like, just be yourself, don't act. Literally just be yourself, be authentic. People are attracted to authenticity and vulnerability. Now, thought leaders, influencers, business owners, entrepreneurs, they're really talking about this a lot now, right? Like you hear a lot of people bring this up as we are right now, literally on a podcast, right? And people are I feel like compared to our older generations, it was more, wear a mask and act, and it's not quote unquote cool to show empathy and love and emotion. Whereas now it's becoming almost the norm. And I even know, like, on a marketing side of things, people like overuse it, right? Which is also some dark magic, but that's also happening. So what you mentioned there, where this generation, the younger kids now who are our future, they have a lot of empathy and emotion already. So where does that come from in your opinion? How do they have that and we didn't when we were kids, for example? Because I sure didn't,
I think it's probably going to be an unpopular opinion, but I do attribute it to the social media and to the fact that our world is so much more connected. They're actually able to see these people in other countries. And, before we would just read about them in a history textbook or maybe see it on the news if we watched it. But now we're actually getting information from across the world live and seeing what's going on. And how can you not relate to a person that you see is suffering, I also do think that humanity tends to go in cycles, and we could get really spiritual in that route. But I talk to a lot of people who have more of a spiritual background, and they've said the same thing, that this next generation is much more, they're like the feelers for sure. And I've seen that in the kids I'm with. The problem is a lot of them have a lot of anxiety. We have depression. And a lot of that has to do with how do you cope with those feelings? How do you those feelings of stress or worry that they're holding in because their parents are of our generation, where they're saying, you fall down, don't cry, you're fine, and that's just kind of our automatic reaction. So, again, with us and when we work with kids, is we really give them an outlet to identify and express their emotions rather than just bury it, but to also learn coping mechanisms to overcome, not to bury it, not to hide it, but to overcome those feelings and use them for positivity and to move beyond them. And I think that a lot of the root of depression, anxiety, even addiction, we can go into a lot of things, comes down to not ever really learning coping mechanisms for your emotions, or even just how to identify them. And in schools, you don't always have the time to do that as well. So that's definitely something we work on with our kids.
Wow. So true. We could go deep on a lot of verticals here. It's true.
Yeah.
For 10 hours. It's so true. Yeah. Cyclical. Absolutely. And this generation is the feeling generation. I've done some reading on that myself, for sure. And yeah, dealing with.
And it's cool. I mean, for anything, with the way the world is going on right now, everyone's so like sad and worried about it. And I'm like, don't worry. These next kids are coming in and they're going to fix it, you know? And so I feel really positive about it, especially knowing the work I do and the kids that I'm working with. And I see their brilliance. And I'm like, you know, why I think especially our work is so important and the message needs to be heard by these people who you're saying are really talking about the authenticity and all of that. This is becoming not a fad. I think people are starting to realize these aren't just nice to have skills, you know, like these are things that we need to know that people have to be successful. We can all think of adults in our lives that lack skills like this, you know, and it would be really nice if they had better, you know, active listening skills or time management skills, because it would be much easier to interact with them. So I think that the messaging has definitely changed in reflection of the times, but I think it's a really good change. And I hope that people heed that advice of knowing that their kids need more than just rote memorization. And I do think that with the pandemic and parents having their kids at home and seeing, wait a minute, my kid is not self-directed at all. Hold on, you know, we have a problem here, I think has really put a spotlight on this, that people are like, no, there's much more to education than what I was expecting was happening. You know, I was handing my kid off to school thinking these things were happening. And now that I see them home for 6 months and I'm like, whoa, my kid cannot do these things. Parents are really looking for a change.
Yeah, absolutely. You're so right about that. They're seeing what the kids are doing and they're like, wait a minute, this is not congruent at all. That's so true. Well, I love the fact that you're on the front line of this, and WorldWise Tutoring is, you know, you are bringing the future generation through the proper channel, right? And that, you know, we need that. Clearly, we have a lot of 60, 50, 40, 70-year-old children walking on the planet. And it'll be a beautiful thing when this generation has empathy and they can deal with it emotionally, and they can learn structure and all of this as well. And they can go out and actually impact the world positively. So I see your vision of positivity, and I stand on that side of the coin with you as well. That's cool. Okay. So for WorldWise Tutoring with an S, where can the listeners come find you and check out what you're doing and look at your amazing work?
So the best place to start is the website, so worldwisetutoring.com. You'll see my messaging has changed a lot with the times. We've always done these services, but I think people are more ready to hear, you know, what's really going on. So there's a lot of, you know, information there. And also if there's parents who are thinking, or educators who are thinking, how can I do this myself? I've started to put, you know, more day-by-day tips of how to do these things on your own, how to be more deliberate about instilling these skills in the youth around you in my blog. So you can read those as well. I have a student handbook, which has a bunch of information for students to help them with their studies. And you'll see on there, you know, I started the learning pods because I do like the idea of these smaller micro schools that the kids are getting more individualized attention. We started a whole enrichment program where kids can explore those personal interests in a short-term way to see if that's something that they're actually, you know, interested in pursuing. And they go range from acting and theater all the way to coding and, you know, personal or public speaking. I mean, there's all kinds of things there just to see so they can play around. I also started a student sponsorship program. So for kids who are falling behind because of, you know, and widening that achievement gap, especially now with the remote learning. So you can learn more about that if you're a business looking for some feel-good marketing, or if you know a student that could definitely use some help but can't afford it. So there's a lot there on the website. We're also on all social media. So if you just find WorldWise Tutoring, you'll find us everywhere. LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, everywhere. And I have a lot of information that I'm diluting day by day for people so that they can implement these things themselves as well.
Yeah, very cool. Awesome. And all those links are down in the show notes or wherever you're here watching this. You can see that everywhere. Lindsey, thank you so much for coming on the Growth Podcast. A wealth of knowledge, WorldWise Tutoring, changing the world one child at a time. This is very cool. Thank you for being a guest.
Thanks for having me, and thanks for letting me tell people about our services and this really important change that we're having.
Absolutely.
I hope you enjoyed today's episode. By the way, you know, there's some people who want to build an online business, but sometimes are scared of scams or who to trust. or they begin and they just get lost in the daily task with no blueprint to follow, right? And because of that, they never get started and just end up staying in the same position year after year because time flies, So if you're thinking to yourself, there must be a way to create a predictable, stable income online, but you don't know where to start, I've got something you might enjoy. Head over to www.bjkugrowth.com. Watch a quick interview I had with my buddy. He's an 8-figure earner. His name is Bashar, and he gets into how he grew into a successful online entrepreneur and how he now is helping thousands of others do the same. You're gonna love it. I've seen so many lives changed just learning this valuable information from him. So it might just be what you're looking for. So go over to www.bjkugrowth.com. I'll see you there. And thanks again for tuning in and supporting the Growth Podcast.